what we'll be using is a real operational database. Now we're using just a portion of it, which is about 3.3 million records. The actual records for this database run anywhere from 350 million to 375 million records, depending on what you use. Several of them we'll type in ourselves in class. The longest one has 50 entries, and you'll learn over the week how we're going to do that. We're going to create several tables, as I said, and just follow through with what I have on the screen, and it should go very smoothly. The other thing we'll do that the book covers is we're going to link tables together, but we're going to link them in a specific way. In our textbook, you can look at a table and you can see what's going to happen when you link it. With this database, you're not going to know what's happening until you actually link the database and run the query. And since this is a chapter on queries, we're going to write several queries to look at. In fact, that's what will take up the lion's share of class today. This is at least a 2-class project, and as I said before we started, I'm at the point where I feel this class can handle it. You guys, I think, are advanced, and I'm very pleased with your work, and I'm willing to cut back a little bit on PowerPoint and give you more on Access. Really, with Access, this is the tool in Microsoft Office that a lot of people use, and they don't have the training they need to do it, and they get in trouble with it. The example that Eric gave before we started the lecture, where if you don't know about the care and feeding of an Access database, you can lose all of your data and all the associated information that's with that data and never get it back, or never get it back in a condition that you can use it. So let's create a table, open up, and hang on a second and I'll show you the screens, but we're going to create a table. Please call it states, and we're going to allow Access to assign the primary key. And I apologize for the pauses because I want to keep saying Oracle instead of Access. This is Access that we're working on. Now, I know I said we don't ever want to go with a key that starts with 1. This is the the table that we're going to create, and I'll show you the associated data in a larger form here in a second. But we're looking at the 50 states. So why would I say we're going to use a primary key from 1 to 50? 50 states, exactly, Eric. It's easier to look at and we can verify, and we're only talking about 50 items. And so it'll be very easy to correct if we make an error. So create your table called states, and this is the data that we're going to enter. Now, I'm going to walk you through the table create in case you're still a little unsure on that. So we'll go to Access. It should show the recent files we have opened, and what we want to do is create a blank desktop database. It's the very first one to the right of the title column. And as we go through this, I'm going to create it a little bit differently than the way the book creates it. So you'll see what happens when we do that. When your states database opens, it's going to look like this. And the first thing we want to do is save this database, and we're going to do it so we can go in and we can name our table. So we want to go over to Files, and we want to click Save Database As. And I want you to look closely at what is in this second column on the Save As. What we want to use is the very top file format. is the word I'm looking for. And if you notice what it says, it is the default access file format. So what that's telling us is it will save our data in the Access Microsoft Office 2013 format. Notice we can go backwards and save to 2010 and save to some other different formats. Word of caution, many times Access is not backward compatible. So if you're working with Access 2013 in the classroom and you go to work and you have Access 2010, there's a possibility that you'll be able to read the data. There's just as likely a possibility that you can't read it, or you'll read it and save it, and then the classroom computer will not read the data that you put in or the additions you made to the table. So that's a word of caution. We ran into this when I worked for Synergy, and we had a large Access database, and the Air Force upgraded to a new version of Microsoft Office. I think it was 2004, maybe, something like that. At any rate, the database would not work because it changed the way it read the data files. And this is one of the few Microsoft programs that you can have backwards compatibility issues with. So a word of caution for that. So we're going to take the first one, the Access database, the current default value, and when you save it, you can save it as housing DB1. And you want to put this on, if you have a...
Do you want Microsoft Access to close the objects?
Yeah.
Yes. The answer is yes. All right. When you save this, save it in the location where you're going to work on your database. So if you're using a thumb drive or a portable hard drive, save it there. Notice the extension is not our normal three-letter extension. It's ACCDB, Access Database. Yeah. Eric's comment was 2016 looks exactly the same, but when he tried to use a 2013 Access file, it didn't work. You saved your data, and now let's go back to the Tables menu, the home view, if you will, and notice what's happened. Our table isn't there. And so,
Security one. Okay.
hang on. So again, what happens when we saved our database, that default table, table 1, that it created is erased because, anybody have a guess? There's no data in it. So why save a table with no data? But I like to do it this way because it establishes my database name, and then I have control of creating the tables. So with that in mind, what we're going to do is go to the Create tab, and we want to select Tables, click on it, and right now, if we tried to rename tables, we couldn't do it. We have to actually close the database, close the table before we can rename it. All right, so what we'll have to do is load our data into it, and then we'll close it. Now, in your table that's open, you need two attributes, two fields. PK, which stands for primary key, and state, PK state, and then the other one is just plain state.
Okay, to write it down?
You're going to, yeah, go ahead and type in just the headings. So PK state is our primary key, and we're going to let it be automatically generated. So we already know that our state primary key is going to be 1 through 50. And then we're going to have state, and that's where we're going to enter our information.
How did you open up that section? I'm not even seeing the table one.
You have to go to Create. Create is the tab across the top, and then click on Table, and it should create Table 1 for you. When we start to enter our data for states, the easiest way to do it is to type in AL for Alabama and hit the Enter key. It'll automatically generate your next primary key, and you can enter AK for Arkansas, and so on and so on. The number should automatically generate. There's the data you need to enter, 1 through 50. And I'll give you a couple of minutes to enter that data. We're going to hand build our query that we're working with. And so we have our table created. Now we're going to rename that table when we're done with it, and we'll rename it states. And as we rename it, it'll automatically change in all the queries we create. But right now, make sure that the table you just created is selected. That means it's got a pink bar on it under the navigation pane on the left-hand side. And then what we want to do is hit the Create tab. And on the Create tab, you should see Query Wizard. And we're going to select the Query Wizard this time today to develop our query. Now on Wednesday, we're going to design our own, which is going to be a lot of fun. And when you look at the Query Wizard, what we want to select is that very top one. It should default to Simple Query Wizard. Now, crosstab query is where we're looking at different tables and combining it into bits of information. The other two, the duplicates query and the unmatched query, those are specific queries that we use in database maintenance that Access will automatically create for us. So if we have time, we'll take a look at those. But for today, we're going to use the simple query. When you select that, you're going to see the first screen that comes up on the left, and it should show you the table ID that we have selected. In my case, I've already renamed it State ID. Yours may say Table 1, and that's fine. And then it should show us the fields that are available. And we've got our primary key, and we have state. And what we want to select is state and move it over to the selected fields. And then we're going to click Next. And this next screen will come up. And notice it's already given it a name, State ID Query. And we want to select the first option. If that's not checked for you, open the query to view the information. Now, before we look at the query, let's take a look at the header that we're going to get. And when you do that, we automatically get the design ribbon that comes across the screen. And what we're going to be interested in today primarily is a select query. Notice we also have the options to make a table, to append, to update, to cross-tab, which we've looked about, and delete. Let me give you a word of caution on delete. I would test my delete on a trial database somewhere before I ran it against my actual data, because once data is deleted, it's gone. Very hard to recover. And I've had employees in the past go through and say, I know what I'm doing, and deleted all the primary keys out of a database, which causes a big mess, especially if it's a little bit larger than our 50 states, like parts numbers that get up into the tens of thousands. So used the delete query very judiciously. The rest we'll talk about as we go through the queries. What you should see underneath that is our design grid. And notice our primary key is there, and then our state listed as a field. If you would, go ahead and click on the sort under our field state, and notice that we have three different options: ascending, descending, or not sorted. Pretty much we put our data in an A to Z sequence. But if you notice in the middle of your data as you were going through, there was one state out of sequence in that data. And believe it or not, in the U.S. Census Bureau database, which is where this comes from, this is the exact table. And I think it's Nebraska is out of sequence. So we have somebody in D.C. who does not know their alphabet, apparently. What we're going to do, just to select something, is go ahead and select descending. And now go back to the ribbon at the top, and you'll notice we have two options, view and run. And we can click either one of those options, and we'll see our data. So go ahead and click either one. Once you do that, it may take a second or two, and up comes our data in descending order, starting with Wyoming first. And notice, some of you have already seen this, we now have a tab that says State ID Query, or Table 1 underbar Query. So we're actually creating a list of data that we can look at in the future once we get our query customized the way that we want it. Now we're going to take a look at external data. And this is where we're going to use the zip file that I asked you to download. Has everybody downloaded it, and is it unzipped into a folder that you can use, easily access? All right.
What was it that you wanted?
All right. In the query field, like and asterisk tells us that it will go through your entire database and look for every record in the field state and find each record that starts with N and any number of characters afterwards. The asterisk means any number of characters after the letter N.
A wild card.
It's a wild card, exactly. Now, Access is very forgiving. If you just typed N asterisk and hit the tab key, Access is smart enough to say, wait a minute, what they really want is anything like N asterisk. So it'll throw the like in for you. And it may also add quote marks around the N and the asterisk. This is one of the things that people have trouble with when they transfer over to Oracle. Oracle is a, relatively speaking, dumb database. If you do something wrong, it'll let you do something wrong until you fix it. It won't give you any hints at all. So that's a good thing about Access. Now, with the like N asterisk, go ahead and run your query. Say we want the states that have N in their abbreviation. So the way we would modify our current query is to go ahead and under criteria where we have or, type like asterisk N. Let's go a step further. A wild card, the asterisk, means any number of characters after or before the letter or the number that we put it in front of. And one of my big contentions is you need to know the data that you're working with. So in this case, knowing our data, we know we only have a two-letter attribute for our state abbreviations. So knowing that, we can change the way that we write our query. The top block shows with the asterisk, but we can also use a question mark. And the question mark in a query in Access means one character or one number. So if you modify your query like I did on the second example here, like in question mark and like question mark in, you're going to get the same results. Now, when we're talking about an attribute that only has 2 characters, that's fine. But if we're talking about a database that may have 100,000 records in it, instead of looking at every instance and every letter in that entity instance attribute, we may only want to look one letter before or one letter after. So knowing your data and what you're looking for decreases the amount of time that your query is going to run. We'll see that a little bit later as we go through. Now, this is a problem that at times people who are new to Access has. There are slider bars at the top and at the bottom of our display grid in the query tab. And periodically that bottom slider will get bumped all the way over to the end. And if you're not aware of what's going on, you're going to go, oh my gosh, I deleted all my query work that I have. Before you panic, look down at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen and see if that slider has been moved to the right. If it has, just slide it back and it'll work fine. You'll see the data. If you slide it back and there's nothing there, then you can panic. Then you have a problem. All right, we're going to close this query. So go ahead and click on the Query tab and close. Well, we're going to get prompted for that, as you see. Do you want to keep or do you want to save the changes made to the state ID query? And we can answer yes or no. If we want to keep it, great. If it's a query that we were running and no, we were just interested in seeing how it works, we can turn it off. So your option, save or not save. This is one of the most useful tools that we're going to use in Access. And this amazes me about this desktop database system. It will import data into your database faster than Oracle or DB5 will import data. The 3.3 million records that we're about to import, if we were to do this with Oracle, would take us somewhere between an hour and a half to import that data. You're going to see how fast it imports here in the classroom. So what we want to do is click on the File menu. Go ahead and close the state table. By the way, click on the File menu, as I said, and if you notice, we now have under Info 2 things that we can do with our database. One is compact and repair, and the other one I advise you to use very judiciously, encrypt with a password. And you may be working on a database you want nobody else to see. You can put a password on that database, but if you forget it, that data is gone. And I've had that happen with a client when I had my consulting firm. We went to Microsoft. They paid $200 to work with a Microsoft tech. And the bottom line after the $200 is exactly what I told the company. You put a password on there, you forgot it, it cannot be hacked. It can't be opened. And so if you put a password on your database, make sure you know what you're doing. Well, we looked at the external tab a few seconds ago, and let's go back to that and click on external and notice the options that we have. We can import from an Excel spreadsheet, We can import from another Access database. ODBC is where we import from an Oracle database. And then we get into the little lineup that we're really interested in. Import from a text file. And
We have to have the,
just go ahead and click on the external tab, external data tab.
okay.
And the question was, how do you unhighlight the table? Just click on the external data tab. So you can see what we're looking at here in this area. Literally, it's right underneath the tab. And what we want to select is the text file. So go ahead and click on text file and walk through this with me as we do it.
Mine is still highlighted, so will it try to,
No,
it won't, I'm good.
it should be all right. When you click on text file, this is the screen that's going to come up. And what you're going to have to do first thing is browse to where you downloaded and unpacked our database housing file. So go ahead and do that.
When you say unpacked it, is that unzip it?
Where you unzipped it to. Yes, sir.
I don't know if I did that.
If we haven't unzipped yet, I'll pause and we'll do that.
Okay then?
Not yet. We're going to look at a couple of things. First of all, we want to make sure once you have your file located, you want to make sure that the first option is selected. Import the source data into a new table. Notice we could append it to a table if we wanted to, or we could link our data. And there's a problem with linking our data. I'm not crazy about that option, and very rarely, if ever, will I use it. Because once you do that, it will not allow you to change that data in Access. It has to be changed in the linked table. So I don't recommend that you use that function. So the one we want is this one right here, import data. And again, if you read down at the bottom, you cannot change or delete data that's linked. So that option used very, very infrequently. You've got your file selected, so now go ahead and I think it's next down at the bottom, and you should see a screen like this. This is all of the data represented in the format that it's currently in. And so we want to make sure that the very top option is selected, and that's delimited character, such as a tab separating each field. Now, in our case, it's not a tab, it's a comma. But as long as we have delimited checked, Access figures it out on their own. When you check the next down at the bottom, you can see that, yep, that's what happened. Access figures it out, but now it wants to verify with you that it's picked the right delimiter. So our delimiter in our case is a comma, so make sure Access selected a comma. And by the way, we're not going to do it with this table, but those lines that outline our data are actually movable. And so this happens more with text than it does with numbers. If it didn't select all of a text field, you can actually modify where it's going to select. Or let's say that large number about the 6th, 7th column, we didn't want all of that number. We only wanted to import the first 4 numbers that are there. We could actually slide over and cut off the last part of that. We're not going to do that today. Verify comma is checked, and then go to next. And in this case, what we are looking at is the ability to name the tables or name the attributes for the table that we're about to create. And what you have to do is click on each little field indicator at the top and name the table. So you'll see field 1, that's where we're starting. All of these can be long integers, so take the default. The index on, there is no index on this database, so we'll leave it no. So what you'll do is go through and rename each field, and here are the names. The first field is state, second is employment, third electrical cost, and so on. You should have 14 fields, so please go through and rename those. Click where it says Field 1. It'll open up the dialog box at the top. You'll see Field 1 is a name, and change that name to state.
So we keep everything long integers?
Keep everything long integer. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I wrote it state now.
And again, all we're interested in are the names. You don't have to enter the numbers, and you don't have to enter the data type. As you're entering this, because we're leaving numbers, you can figure out that we're going to do mathematical calculations with the data that's in there. Let's go to the next screen. And here, Access will choose a primary key, or we can. So in this place, we're going to choose our own primary key, and we're going to select state. Now, here's the problem. If you look at the first two data entries that Access has selected, we see that we have multiple primary keys listed, and our definition of a primary key is that it's a unique identifier for an object. So what we actually have here, and they don't list the name, but we have a foreign key. That's a primary key from another table that's used to identify our object in our state data table. So we want to select state as our primary key. So do that, please, and select next. We have import. So there's the data that we're going to import, and we want to hit finish. It'll take a second or two, maybe even up to 3 or 4 minutes, depending on the speed of the computer. And when you get done, it should open up a table named Modified No Header Processed Housing Data. Yes, because we may re-import. So yes, what we're doing, saving import steps, means if we want to re-import this table, we can click on it and go. Now,
What about the description?
description, you can put import housing data.
Oh, it worked.
Yeah, it worked. Now, why do you think it worked? It brought all our data in, but why did we get the prompt that we had a null field in the primary key?
Is that for repeat numbers?
Nope. Nope, not a repeat number.
Oh, there's a blank one.
There is a blank one, and more than likely, don't go in and look at it. You may screw your computer up. But at the very bottom of that 3.3 million records, there's probably a blank line, which is set up by the last data entry in the text file. And so it's reading that and saying, whoa, you got a null primary key. All right. So if you look down at the bottom, you can see the record numbers. And how many records did you import?
3,012,242.
That went pretty quick, didn't it?
It's amazing.
It is amazing. Now,
Tweak it.
yeah, I typed it all in myself. The question, Stephen, was who created the data, and you're going to have to come to class to find that out.